What's up, guys? Welcome to the garden. I'm your host, Taryn Balzana, and I am joined by some very special guests today. I'm so over the moon for this episode and the wisdom that I already know that these two are going to have. So, welcome, Blakely and Maia Huff.
Oh, yay! Thank you so much for having us. We love you so much. We're honored to be here.
And we're not a married couple.
Yes.
Right, no, they're not. Sorry if I gave the wrong impression. Yeah. Would you guys mind telling everybody a little bit about yourselves?
Okay. So Maya and I guess I can speak for both of us to some extent. We are both from the Panhandle area, so, Niceville, ranging all the way. Maya grew up a bit in Panama City and 30A and all the things. I went to Pepperdine in California for school and then found myself back in Niceville for the last year or so, and in the last couple years, Maya and I have started a whole plethora of things together that fall under the overflow category. So we started with ministry, then we turned to more social media management, marketing stuff, and then now we do both. So it's the best of both worlds, and we're just having a blast. And Maya can share a bit more about herself.
Yeah, that was so good. I love it. Yes, and I'd say the thing, I went to Florida State University, and then my husband plays baseball, so we are traveling all over the place, and then now we're back here for off season. So it's super sweet when Blakely and I get to actually be in person together. It's like the best thing in the entire world. So we're happy to be together. If you're not watching, if you're listening, we're both getting to sit in the same room, which is a very big blessing to the both of us. So we're excited about that.
Yeah.
That is super special. I know you guys have spent a lot of time apart doing these things, and so I'm sure that it's really nice to be together for this time. Even in y'all's telling about yourself, you can tell that you both have been in so many different seasons. And it's funny because I actually asked all my guests, what's something that God is leading you to grow in this season currently? And so that we're also talking about seasons, and that's something that I ask all my guests. So we'll just kick it off with, what is an area that God's leading you to grow in currently?
Okay. Oh gosh, that's such a good question. My answer would probably be different 2 weeks ago, but I've been through just a lot of trials this past 2 weeks, and I would say Blakely and I actually were talking about this morning on our team call, and my aunt, who is just so incredible and loves the Lord so much, she's going through cancer right now, and we were all praying over her on Sunday night, which was about 2 nights ago, and we were all praying over her, and she was just beaming. She was so just joyful, and she starts to share after we had all prayed for her, and she said something. I'm actually going to pull it up because of the way she said it was way better than I could, but she said, in hard times we focus on how our faith grows, but what's really happening is we realize his faithfulness to us. And so I feel like this past season of my life, the past 2 weeks, little bit of just a lot of kind of just trial after trial, I feel like I'm realizing not so much of, yes, my faith is growing, which is so beautiful, but it's because I'm realizing his faithfulness to me during these trials. And it's been such a sweet thing. I think during trials we think of our faith is growing so much. And I love that my aunt said it's actually us realizing of how faithful he is to us that is growing our faith. And so I feel like God's really been teaching me a lot about how he is so faithful amidst just trials, and even whenever it seems like everything on earth is just going crazy, I've just been really reminded of the ultimate faithfulness of heaven. So I feel like that's a little bit about what God's been teaching me in this season. It would have been a lot different, honestly, literally 3 weeks ago, but I'm very, very thankful to be learning this right now in this season.
That's so good. I love that.
I've been thinking a lot, and Maya already knows what I'm going to say, but just what it means to be all in for God. I've been seeing in my life God's consistency and my lack of consistency with him, and just how God's not asking us to be consistent with him and showing up and having a quiet time every day to check off a box or out of any place of works, but more so that is the way to sustain any relationship in life. It's if Maya and I didn't talk for weeks, we would come together and inevitably feel super distant.
Mm-hmm.
And the same is our relationship with God. If we're not spending time with Him and we're not spending genuine time with Him, I mean, I can open up my Bible and read a couple of verses and, it do nothing to me because mentally I'm just somewhere else. But when we're spending genuine time with God, it just fosters this relationship. And I think that's what I'm learning is just what it looks like to be all in any relationship, but in our relationship with God, what that looks like.
Also so good. I love it. I know that you guys did an episode, and I actually re-listened to it this morning because you did your episode on abiding in God in every season. And when I heard that, it was so good. And this topic and this episode has been on my heart for a really long time, and it just wasn't the right time. And which sounds like crazy that it's seasons and it's change and it's how could there not be a right time for that, but I was just not getting the green light from God. And we had already had an episode scheduled, and I was like, I'm not quite sure what I want y'all to talk about yet, but I know that I want your wisdom on something. And I had gone to God, and I know that y'all have both been through so many different things in life, so many different seasons. And when I heard your episode on that, I was like, oh my goodness. Obviously, it's them, and this is what we need to talk about, and now is the time. And so I have been so excited ever since God did give me the green light, where I have just been super, super pumped to have this conversation. And there was a lot of notes that I took on y'all's episode, and so I kind of like want to talk about some of that today, but I also want to approach the seasons kind of like you did, by literally winter, spring, summer, fall, because that sounds really simple, but there's so much depth to it, and y'all did so good at just diving in. And so I want to start out with Ecclesiastes 3:1, and I'm going to read it. And it says, "For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to loose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace." And so, literally showing that there is a time and a season for everything. And everything has a purpose. And so I had listened to a podcast from somebody a while ago, and they said that they like to do that with their spouse, that they would read Ecclesiastes 3:1 and be like, what season do you feel like you're in right now? And so I know we kind of just talked about where God has you growing right now, but what season do you feel like you're in right now?
Oh gosh, that's such a good question. You gonna hit this one first?
Yes. Somehow I'm in all four.
I actually get that. Yeah.
I am somehow in all four. I feel as I didn't share this, but I just got engaged and I'm getting married pretty quickly in February. And with that, there's just been a lot of change pretty much in like most areas of my life, moving and getting married. And we have some work changes and there's just a lot of change. And with that, there's the summer season of so much excitement and celebration and all the things. And then there's the spring season of like new things being birthed and things that I've been waiting on, such as marriage. And then fall is inevitable because in fall the leaves are changing, and my life, it feels like everything's changing. And then there's the winter season where there's harder things and there's just been some harder things lately. And I think in the midst of all of that joy and celebration, and I'm sure maybe you're experiencing this too in engagement, there is just a lot that you're processing and grieving and all the things. And so somehow I am in all four.
That is hilarious. Honestly, so honest. I would say I would say 2 weeks ago, different answer, but I would say now, I would say I'm going through like a winter season, like a season of just like kind of waiting, of just like really just closeness with God, like trying to stay close to Him to stay warm because if it just feels very cold and very just not a lot going on as far as life outside. And so I feel like, yeah, I've really been I'm right now in the past 2 weeks in it for a little bit. I feel like I'm going to be just in a little bit of a winter, just waiting season. And that has been, and those seasons, as much as we don't want to welcome them, they truly prune so much. And just really how you redefine your roots, which is probably why I'm going back and the faithfulness of God and the character of God. So it kind of all makes sense, but it's been really a sweet but also difficult winter season.
I can relate a lot with Blakely at the time because I also feel like I am in all four at the same time.
And he does that to you. I'm married, so I remember that.
Also recently engaged. We are also getting married very quickly in January. And so it's, yeah. Super exciting. So much change. Like the fall, so much bloom, like the spring, so much goodness and celebration, like the summer. And then so much of just making sure that I'm also clinging to the Lord in this season, and just really drawing near to Him. In the fact that with these changes come so many different emotions, and you guys had said on your podcast like two things can be true at the same time, and it can be so exciting and so celebratory, but it can also be I am coming up on leaving everything I've ever known. I've lived in the same place my whole life, like, and so there's also that sense of this is a lot, but it's all of it at once. And so trying to find the balance of soaking in every season, as in there's a purpose for every season, and when you're going through all of them at the same time, it can be challenging to make sure that you are soaking in the purpose of every season when you're in the midst of all of them. Yeah. So I want to kind of go one by one, and I liked the structure of the way that you guys did it by doing winter, spring, summer. And I know that we're in fall right now, so naturally we could talk about that first. But I think I want to talk about winter first. And this will be coming out Thanksgiving week, and so I think that that's a really good way to actually start out. In wintertime, it can be so hard to find gratitude and to give the Lord praise, because you kind of can be in the trenches and you don't really, it can be hard to just find that. And we're called to give thanks in everything. And when you dwell on that, that can be so hard, like in everything give thanks. But that literally means in everything. And so with that, what do you have on winter?
Yeah, gosh, so good what you said about finding gratitude and kind of to give people an understanding of what winter is and kind of what Blakely and I were talking about. is sometimes we wish in life that our seasons came where it was like, okay, I know winter is next, or I know that fall is next, which is kind of like a season that represents change. And when we think about winter, we think about literally looking outside the window and just everything's pretty much dead outside. Like there's no more colors going on. It just, you look outside, maybe you look at your circumstances, you're in a season where you're looking out and just everything just seems desolate. Everything just seems like, why are things not growing? Why am I getting shut door after shut door? Why am I just like experiencing, maybe it's something with family brokenness and then your job starting to fall. It just, things just seem to be like there's no fruit outside. There's no blooms like in summer and fall where God's doing these new things. It's honestly just a time where things maybe are broken or also just quiet. Like you've been praying for something for a while and it's just quiet. And in the winter season, we assume a lot of times that when we're looking outside that everything's just dead, but that's not really what's happening. And if you even just look at like a plant's life, their roots are being strengthened and growing. They're pruning. They're taking off the things that were bad in that would not produce fruit later on, because God knows that, hey, this branch is not going to produce fruit later on, so I'm actually just going to use this winter season to cut this off. And maybe it's pride in your heart, or maybe it's, you know, just you attaching yourself to your job so much, you know, and finding your worth in that. And he wants to kind of show you that your identity is actually in Christ. And so what God is ultimately doing in these winter seasons is, it feels like teaching us a lot, but it can be really hard when we always pray. I feel like a lot of people, we pray, it's like, God, make me more like you. And then we turn into a winter season where things are stripped away and God's working on refining our hearts and working on us trusting and having faith in him, even when we don't see the fruit. And we're like, wait, I didn't know that this was me becoming more like you. And so I feel like that is kind of just like a gist of what the winter season kind of is and looks like on a broad scale. And we could talk a little bit more about specifics in that, but do you have anything to kind of add?
Yeah, so many things came to my mind as you were talking, but I think that one thing I feel really passionate about in the winter season, and we talked about this morning in our Devo, was just in these seasons, it's really easy to push away from God. Yes. And I think that for some reason within Christianity, it has become a thing to put on this front that you have no doubts and no struggles in believing with God, believing in God, no struggles in your relationship, God. We come to small groups and church settings and anything spiritual wanting to say these big theological things when on the inside we're really struggling. And I think that one of the most influential things in my walk with God through a winter season is authenticity and vulnerability with him, of where I am genuinely at, my hurt, my frustration, my expectations being lost and killed and changed, and just coming to him and being like, I am really struggling right now wanting to spend time with you. I'm struggling believing these things. I'm struggling having faith that you're going to be faithful in this area of my life, or whatever it is. And I think that God honors that authenticity so much. So good. And I just don't think we can get over those humps until we give it to God. Like we always say, bring your burdens to the cross, all these things. But how often do we actually do that with our own like thoughts and doubts? It's easy to be like, oh God, I messed up, here's that. But to be like, here are my areas that I'm struggling in belief of you is hard as Christians to do that. But I think that once we truly give that to God, that's when he can meet us and say, I love you so much, and I am the God of comfort and peace and loyalty and consistency, and you will see that. So I think that would be like, maybe Maya explained what the season is. That's more so like my tip to someone who is in a winter season, just having that vulnerability with God. And in the end, it's like it says in John 15, it says, he cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. And I think when we give God our doubts and frustrations, he will only use that to increase our faith in him down the line. So that fruit will become become even more fruitful. So it's so good.
As I was reflecting on these different seasons and thinking of different seasons that I've been in, I realized that so many of them had lined up so perfectly with the seasons of the year, and just how intentional God is. And I was thinking of last year, literally in the midst of winter in January of 2024 when my sister passed away. And it's already winter, and in that, life was as wintry as it could get. Um, so lifeless, and so just was really hard to see the beauty in anything. And it was when I felt the Lord say to me, like, it's just you and me now. And I really started being vulnerable with him. And that was when I also realized that there can be beauty in that winter as well. And such a year that started out in such a hard way became honestly one of my favorite years to talk about, because there was so much goodness of God to reflect on. And I got to see where I started in the deepest, darkest place in the dead of winter, and got to see him just turn it into something beautiful. And so I think that, like, that is just like what you were saying, Blakely, that is so important to just draw near to him and just be real with him. And obviously he knows what you're going through, but there's such a freedom found in when you just lay it all down at his feet. And so, yeah.
So beautiful. Thank you for sharing that too.
Yeah.
It reminds me of Romans 8:28, that God brings all things together for good.
Mm-hmm.
Just hearing you say that was one of your now like favorite like years of like the goodness that you've seen from him, is just only God can do that. It's so beautiful. Such a testament.
I think that in the midst of every season, I think every season has its challenges. Even in summer, when it's all beautiful and bright and celebratory and there's vacations and all the things, every season has its challenges. And that was Romans 8:28 was literally my verse for the year last year. God will turn all things around for good. What is some fruit that you can look back on that has grown in a winter season? I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were saying how you would be surprised of what grows in the winter, and it looks like there's nothing happening, but there's so much happening beneath the ground, deep in your heart and physically outside. There's so much happening in the soil, and God is preparing for there to be bloom in spring. And so what is fruit that you've seen come out of a hard winter season?
I would say a strengthened relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
When you are in a relationship with a boyfriend, fiance, husband, I'm assuming, haven't been there yet. But when you're in a relationship with a significant other and you go through a hard disagreement, fight, whatever it is, I think most people get to the other side and they say, wow, I feel even closer. I feel more connected. I feel more in love even with this person. And the same to me is true with a winter season with us and God. I look back on winter seasons and I think that God gave me the opportunity to just fall into his arms as my loving father in a way that spring, summer, and fall seasons don't do as much. It's obviously a harder season, but in a lot of ways, you just have nowhere to turn. So it's like, all right, God, you're all I got. It's you and me. I think you said that. And so I think that it just gives you an opportunity to really strengthen that relationship and come out on the other side. And like you said, how that was your favorite year, just to look back and be like, wow, like we did that together. And I got to see you be faithful, and I got to see your love for me in a way that I haven't in a few months or years or whatever it is.
It's so good. I love that so much. I'd say pretty much kind of like going off the end of what you said, for me, I think I've seen a lot in the winter time, a deeper dependence on God, like exactly pretty much what you were saying, of like me, I think so often in the winter, and I would say if you're in a winter season, I hope that you hear this and that this encourages you. I think we so often in a winter season run to like anything else but God first to like help us in the winter season. We're like, okay, well, you know, whether it's like posting once on social media or whether it's food or whether it's friends or whether it's, you know, all those things are good things, but I think we run to those things like first whenever we're in the winter season. And and then maybe for some it's bad habits as far as like maybe alcohol, or like that's really where, if you see a lot of different addictions or things, like where they're honestly birthed from is from a tough season where you just are trying to maybe numb the pain. You don't want to sit alone with God, or you don't know how to. I mean, there's so many people out there who are maybe listening to this and you're like, I don't know how to sit alone with God. And so I feel like I just want to encourage you because of what I've noticed in the winter seasons, because as you go throughout life, you'll have like multiple of them, but those have created such a deeper dependence where I've tried all the other things, and I've realized now, like in past seasons, I tried to run to all the other things, like when I was single, guys, whenever, you know, I was in college, drinking and all these things, and none of those were able to give me the peace and the joy, the healing that I was found in God. None of those. Like no guy, no affirmation from him was able to make me feel the love that I felt from the Lord in the winter seasons. And so I feel like, as I'm thinking like specifically of winter seasons in college, I think right now, as now that I'm 25 and I've gone through multiple of them, I think it's been so interesting and beautiful for me to see that as I've been going through this, really my first thing that I'm running to, I noticed there's like a few little things I still try and run to, but I'm so much quicker to be like, God, I need you. Like, I'm not fooling myself anymore thinking that the guys are going to help or the alcohol or whatever is going to help. Like, I know that I'm to. And so I'm so much quicker and so much more dependent on God because of those winter seasons in the past, as painful as they've been. And I feel like it's just, even right now, I'm 25 and he's teaching me an even deeper dependence on God, on him, to be like, okay, I'm not going to run to, you know, a doctor to help, or I'm not going to run to, like, yes, those are all good things, but God, I need you first, and you are the ultimate healer. So I feel like that's what I've really been learning, is just, and this, I think, everything that Blakely said, and then that's kind of another, I think, fruit of just the winter season that really summer doesn't teach you, you know, because in summer there's a lot of beautiful distractions and great things happening, you know, like thank the Lord for summer season. But I think in winter it's easy to run to other things, so that dependence is really good.
I think that, as crazy as this is about to sound, I think that winter seasons with the Lord have honestly become one of my favorite seasons with the Lord, because I can just look back on so many different winter moments and see how much stronger that my relationship with the Lord became out of it. And so looking back, it helps me go into the other seasons so much better and more prepared because of how much me and God prepared in that winter season. And it's like, I mean, you think of spring or summer or even fall. I know fall here is literally crazy busy. Like, people come from all over, and we have this thing called Talamina Drive, and everybody goes on it, and they want to see the foliage and leaves changing. And in spring and summer and fall, there's so much attention, and there's so much like all eyes on you type of thing, because you're and literally like the literal season. Spring, everybody wants to see the new colors, and everybody's going outside, and the weather's nice again. And summer, and everybody's getting together and having vacations. And fall, even the changes are still pretty. But winter, everybody kind of retreats and goes inside, and you're kind of isolated. And that's when it's really, you get to focus on you and God. It's literally just you and God. And I think that I have become, honestly, so like I said, that they've just become one of my favorites, because as much as I love the other seasons, when you get to kind of not be distracted by the other things, and it's not all eyes on you, it's just God's eyes on you, and that is just so special to me. As hard as it is also very special. So after winter, we have spring, and I loved how you guys talked about spring can be hard after winter. And I want to ask, how do you stay open to new growth after a hard or dormant season?
I'm not sure if this is totally answering the question, but one thing that Maya and I talk a lot about that maybe would hinder someone from being open to growth and appreciating the gift that God has given at the end of a winter season is the fear of accepting that gift if it's taken away. Because you know just how dark the winter is and that waiting season is. And I think it can be hard to, when the flowers bloom again and, you know, God bestows that gift upon you, it's so scary to accept it because you're just so fearful that it could be taken away. And I can just think back of different times in my life I've experienced this, and I've actually really struggled with this topic a lot in my life. It's why I started going to counseling, and I was actually fighting thoughts of that earlier today. But I just think this is something that's not really talked about a lot, and it's something that even since we released the last episode that I think a lot of people struggle with is, I just went through a really hard season, or I just went through a really dark waiting season, and now God's giving me this blessing and I just am too afraid to accept it. And I think the biggest tip I would have for someone going through that, and something that's really helped me, two things. One is re-teaching yourself the character of God through scripture, mainly through the Gospels, just seeing the character of Jesus and understanding that he operates out of a place of love, never to play games. I always say God's not a God of games. He's not giving us something to take it away and being like, ha ha ha, I pranked you. He always has purpose in everything that he does or allows. And so that would be my biggest tip, is reteaching yourself the heart and character of God. But also the second is operating out of a place of gratitude. And what that looks like for me is every single morning waking up, and the first thing I write my prayers to God, and the first thing I do in that is always gratitude, and nothing changes our heart like gratitude. And so I think sometimes when you're fearful to accept something, just regardless of that, just giving thanks to God and just continually showing gratitude for that will change your heart, and I think inevitably that will change the way you receive the gift.
So good. I have kind of a personal story, I feel like, that goes completely along with Blakely's and kind of in the same topic, which I hope is kind of answering your question, which I think it is. But kind of this idea that after, the winter season, you finally are seeing this growth and everything that Blakely said. And I feel like I've been through that a lot personally recently. The past however many months, my husband and I have been so excited. We've been in a waiting winter season, but simultaneously excited because we've been trying to have a baby. And so we were just been for months, just so waiting and waiting and waiting. And then finally we got pregnant, and we were so excited. This is recently. We got pregnant, and we were what had seemed like the winter season, of waiting, kind of to being okay, we're out of this. We have the positive pregnancy test. We're so excited. The spring is coming. And I remember I was talking to my mom about, I told her that she was pregnant. I was pregnant. My mom wasn't pregnant. I was pregnant. We had told her we were pregnant, and I was like, I can't help like, I just have this little bit of, fear. And we had already filmed the podcast that you're talking about and referencing. And she's like, Maya, do you remember when you said in that podcast that you just have to accept the gift and celebrate the gift for as long as you may have it? And I was like, ugh. And as soon as she said that, I felt so convicted. And she was like, celebrate this gift. We aren't promised that this baby will make it to the rest of their life, but we are promised that we have this gift right now. And so celebrate it. And so for the remainder of the weeks that we knew that we were pregnant, we celebrated our baby's life like so much. We had told friends, we talked about her or him every single day, and we were in this spring season of just so thankful for this gift. And then unfortunately, what I've been talking about in the past, what I keep referencing the past 2 weeks, we miscarried. And it's been quite a long process. If you see me making funny faces over here, it's because I'm actually currently feeling some of the pains of it as we're sitting here. And so if you see me making funny faces, don't judge me. But what I kind of have, when we were talking about this, and I'm just thinking back to that episode, everything that Blakely's saying, not for a minute, when I remember one of my friends like, I bet it's really hard because you've celebrated and and I was like, I could not be more thankful that every single second that we knew we celebrated that gift, and I enjoyed that gift from God. And just because it's no longer here and I won't meet that baby earside does not mean that it hasn't been such a gift in our lives. So anyways, I just want to encourage somebody who maybe you have that fear that Blakely and I have like really realistically walked through, and I've like really been processing this little bit, but I have no regret in how we celebrated and we rejoiced in the gift that God had given us for the time that we had it. And I wouldn't want it. Honestly, I think I would be sitting here very differently today if I had been sitting in fear the whole time, and I think I would be sitting in a lot of regret, because I would have been like, God, you gave me that gift for that time, and I know that although I can't control the circumstances, I know that I have been faithful to rejoice in the gifts that you've given me. So we don't know how long our gifts are going to last and what our circumstances will bring, but we can rejoice in the gifts that God's given us while we have them. So anyways, that's kind of a personal story to share kind of along this note.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm like getting emotional over here too, because I just think of the realness of that. I just love, you don't know how long the gifts that he gives you are going to last, but just celebrate them while you have them. And I'm thinking about, I also go to counseling, and I was telling my counselor so the plan before me and Trent got engaged was I was going to move down to where he lives to be closer. And I told my counselor, I was like, sometimes when I can't, we all imagine and we make up scenarios in our head. And I'm like, sometimes when I can't imagine it, when I can't picture it, I just think that it's not going to happen. And so I start building my expectation, yes, I'm preparing for it, but it's not really going to happen. I'm not really going to get it. And it was super interesting because I was supposed to move in November, and it just wasn't, things were not falling into place like anticipated. And I was just like, God, what is going on? What are you doing? I don't understand. I know that I'm supposed to be with this person. I know that you sent me him, but I just don't understand what you're doing. And I was in a really dark place for a couple weeks. And I think every night on the phone, I just cried to Trent. And he was so patient and gracious with me. But I just cried because I just didn't understand what God was doing. And come to find out, that all led to Trent calling my dad and having another conversation, because my parents had said we should spend more time together before we got married. The conversation he had asked my dad earlier a few months ago, and my parents were like, oh, you guys should spend some more time together. And so that was the plan. I was going to move down in November, and we were going to be closer to each other so we could spend more time together. Well, because I couldn't move in November, that led Trent to calling my dad and having another conversation. And that led to my parents being completely on board for us to actually get engaged and get married even sooner. And now we are engaged and planning a wedding. And so it's like, when you don't understand, like I had no idea that all of this was going to come out of that. I'm just like, oh, now it's going to be delayed even more. I want to spend the rest of my life with this person, and now it just keeps getting moved and pushed back. But yet God had a plan the whole time. And it was kind of like a 2 seasons back to back. Like for 2 weeks, I was in this winter because I just didn't understand what was happening. When I know his promises and I know what he's revealed to me, and I know I'm confident in who he is, but it's like I just don't understand. And I found myself also reverting back to this fear mindset in when Trent proposed on November 1st. He had planned this whole scavenger hunt, and we went on a scavenger hunt on our first date. So he had planned this whole scavenger hunt throughout my town, and I had no idea. I thought my town had put this scavenger hunt on. And so as we're going through these as we're going through these different stops and reading these different clues, and I started catching on to some things. Like one stop was this flower shop, and me and my mom and my niece were doing the scavenger hunt together. And obviously my mom and my niece were in on it. And we went to this flower shop, and there was like little mini bouquets for each of us. And one of the flowers in the bouquet was a hydrangea, and that's my favorite flower. And they're not easy to find. People don't always have them, and especially around this time of year. And so I was like, interesting. Like, I started noticing like little details. And one stop was a pizza truck, and when I walked out, they're like, it's Taryn, and I was like, weird that they were like expecting me. And then they gave us 3 pizzas of what me and my family's orders are. And I was like, interesting, weird, whatever. And so I started catching on to these things, and I'm like, okay, this would like make a lot of sense. Like we went on a scavenger hunt on our first date. Like if this is what he's doing, and I started to kind of understand what was going on and catch on. But there was also that part of me that's like, well, I don't want to say anything, because if this isn't what I think it is, I don't want to be disappointed. And I told my niece had like vlogged the whole thing, and so there's points in the video, and Trent was watching it, and he was like, you can see where like your wheels are turning. And he's like, did you know? And I was like, I had suspicions. Like I felt like I probably knew what was going on, but I didn't want to set myself up for disappointment if it wasn't what I thought it was. And so, and the further I got on, like it was so clear that was what was happening. But it wasn't until the very last stop where one of the clues, it ended in go to this place for some new hand bling. And it wasn't until it was literally in words, like I'm literally reading it. And so I was like, okay, this is happening. And I say all of that to say that it can be so hard to be open to that growth and the good things after the hard seasons and after the waiting seasons. And I just, even in that, like where I knew what was happening, and I still was like, but what if it's not? Even though it's so clear that this is what God is doing, and that he's giving me this, and this is such a beautiful thing, what if it's not? And I don't want to get too excited, because I don't want to get disappointed. And as I've found myself telling that to a lot of people, because so many people were in on it, and they're like, did you know? And all these things. And I found myself saying that, and I was like, wow, that was really just out of fear. That was out of fear of, what if this good thing that I think is happening is not actually happening? And so I just loved that you guys talked about that, because it is so real, and it's not talked about enough, how actually hard a spring can be after a winter.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Your story made me think of two things, and you kind of like alluded to this, but I love like this one truth of God doesn't expect us to like know the circumstance or how it's gonna like all pan out, you know? Like we're not meant to know like what all is like supposed to happen, but trusting Him. And I think that comes to like the second thing it just like made me think of is like God like in this circumstance, like if it happens, well, one, I'm just gonna enjoy, I'm gonna be present where you have me, but I'm also going to allow to myself to know that whatever happens, God, you are going to be good to take me through all the different seasons. Like kind of like what you're, you know, like that like erases the fear that you're talking about when it's like, God, you're going to be the same no matter what happens, even though I don't know the circumstances. Like that's why you're able to enjoy the gift of being present, like during that engagement process and during that time, you know, is like being able to know that God, I know that even if it looks different than what I imagine it or whatever it is, like God, I know that you are going to carry me through all of it, which is like going back to what Blakely said. It's like we made a big triangle of things, but it's like going back to Blakely said of like knowing the character of God, of going back and seeing like His intention is never to make you fearful, but like to show you just how much He loves us, and sometimes it looks different. So I love that so much, and what a sweet engagement story.
I know.
Oh my gosh, that is
kudos to that man.
Yeah, you need to like write all that out. That is the cutest thing ever.
It was the sweetest thing. I mean, he literally he had to work on Friday night and told me he was like going to bed and was tired and at like 9:30. And I was like, weird, like he doesn't usually go to bed this early ever. And he ended up, when we said goodnight, he ended up driving all night. It's 9.5 hours without stops from Del Rio to where I live.
Oh my god.
And so drives all through the night, gets here around like 11 in the morning. Him and my niece's boyfriend go around town placing all of these clues, setting everything up. And then he goes and just like sits on the top of the mountain and waits for me.
That is precious in every single way. That's a dream right there. That's crazy.
Wow.
I know.
So sweet.
Wow.
You need to write all of that down for a memory.
Yeah. It was so precious. And it's one of those things, like ever since you're a little girl, you make up scenarios and you imagine things, and I'm a big dreamer. And so I've always like, oh, what if this or what if that? And I think it's also so God when it's like you think that you're coming up with these like super cool, extravagant ideas and scenarios, and then God's like, yeah, but it's going to be even better than that. And it's like, I couldn't have even imagined or dreamed up the extent of how amazing that was and how special that was and how intentional and everything that was. And so it was just, God just completely worked through him to exceed my expectations. And it's just so cool when you can see God's hand so evidently in things. And that's been our entire relationship. But to see it also in that, where that's such a big deal. And God was like, I know the prayers you've prayed. I know the things that you've dreamed up. And I've heard the desires of your heart. And this is how much I love you. And to everyone else, it looks like, well, this is how much Trent loves you. But it's just, I have been so overwhelmed by the goodness of God and in how much Trent loves me, really how much God loves me.
It's so beautiful. It's so sweet.
So, jumping to... Thank you. Thank you.
You deserve it. So the whole time I was just thinking about exactly what you just said, that if Trent can love you this much, this is just a tiny, tiny little reflection of how much God loves you.
So sweet.
So now, summer. Sometimes we it can be easy in summer to get distracted by all the goodness. And so, how do you guard against pride in seasons of abundance?
Oof.
Good question.
Of all of the seasons, I said this on our podcast too, this might be the one I am personally most hey Strikey, that I'm most passionate about, just because I think it's the most overlooked, in the sense of there is so much goodness and celebration and God's faithfulness and all these things. But to me, this is the season of life that's the hardest for me in my walk with God. I actually crave winter seasons to some extent, because I am put in a position where I can only trust God and I'm forced to fall on my knees before Him. Whereas the summer, and I've actually been going through this a little the last couple of weeks, and Maya knows about it, but it is just so easy to gain apathy, and it's easy to gain just a lack of dependency on God, because your circumstances are just so good and there is so much joy happening. And even though I said at the beginning, I feel like I'm in all of the seasons right now, obviously the headline of my seasons is a summer season. I'm in engagement, I'm getting married, and it's all just happened so fast and it's so exciting and all these things. And I think in that I've been so distracted. I think that summer season can be really distracting, and it puts the focus more on ourselves rather than our dependency on God. So summer season is really just, to me, it's the easiest to grow distant from God. I know that's different for everyone, but I personally think for me, this season is the easiest for my relationship with God to suffer. And even I like saying, like, for me, it's easier to live in a place that needs God more than a place that, like, when I live in a place that there's a lot of darkness inevitably around me, I like living there more, because I am forced to be dependent on God every single day living there. Whereas when you live somewhere such as 30A, that is amazing and so nice, and it's an easy place to live. It's a lot harder to be dependent on God in a place like that. And I'm not throwing shade at 30A or anything that, but just for me personally, it's easier to be in a season or a place where there is a greater need for God than an easier situation or a better season.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think the way to combat that, since you kind of we're keep on popping, which is perfect, but I think the way that, like, me personally, to combat whenever I'm in a summer season and I'm seeing, the fruitfulness of God, I'm seeing, things that I maybe prayed for a long time coming into fruition, and, like, just prayers answered, and maybe it's like a time full of community and just chances doing great in baseball, just all the things, you're just on that mountaintop. I think something that I've had to, like, really, because it's the same as Blakely, it can be so hard to really abide in God in that season, because you feel like, oh, well, everything's fine. Why do I really need the Lord right now? And we forget that the reason that all of this beauty has come is because of the hand of God, like, because of Him allowing this. And good, a perfect gift comes from above. So literally every single one of those things in the summer has come from Him. And so I think one of the ways to combat this, because I have definitely been there, and I feel like that's when my time with God kind of, like, starts to drift, because I don't necessarily, like, need Him as much. Like, right now while I'm going through this, I'm like, God, I need your word. Like, I'm like, God, I truly cannot come, like, and do the things I need to do without your strength. Like, I am so weak, but there's the summertime we often feel strong. And the way to combat it, that I keep on getting sidetracked from actually saying, is, like, genuinely making it a not just not just a thing that I fill and check in the box, but, like, a genuine thing where I am coming and I am meeting with God, and I am, and the best thing to start with, as Blakely said earlier, is gratitude of, like, God, I recognize the blessings that are around me. And I'm not just saying, like, do this once a week. I mean, like, truly
every day.
Daily. Like, the way that we are in the winter season, constantly abiding in God, and how we love that. Like, we have that ability too in the summer. And I think like just like constantly being like, God, daily, I am so grateful. And whether it's a designated, I think we should always have a designated time where we're actually like reading scripture daily and like talking to God daily and praying with him daily. But then I think there's also those times in our day when we're on our lives and we're like, gosh, Lord, like there's been so many drives I've had where I'm like, I can't even believe, God, the blessings that are just flowing in this season right now. And like, rather than turning on, you know, pop music and like jamming out, which is sometimes great and fun, I'm like, I'm going to take every moment with you, God, and I'm going to just truly praise you for what I have. And I feel like getting serious about, and the one, I feel like recognition is just such an important thing of like realizing the summer season, it is going to be harder. And be like, okay, I am in a summer season. I'm seeing a lot of fruition with work or with my family community. So like, God, I really want to make a goal of this season that I wouldn't lose my just dependency on you. And so I'm going to be grateful to you throughout my day, still consistently spending time with the word. I think the most kind of like dangerous times, I guess, in my faith and when I'm doing things for the Lord is whenever I don't think I need his word and I don't think I need him to fulfill something like a podcast or something like just whatever it is, a post for social media or a call with a client. And so anyways, I think that just really getting serious would be my number one thing about combating is like putting it as a goal, a priority to spend time daily with God and like throughout your day, thank him with everything that you have.
So good.
Yeah, I think that there is like so much goodness and beauty, and you just have to remember where it all comes from. And so when you do, that can, and doing that, it can definitely help keep him at the forefront when it seems like, oh, there's so much going on and there's so much goodness and all these things, but it's like they're only there because of the Lord. And so remembering that first, I think, is so important. And then last but not least, fall, which is literally the season that we're physically in right now. But I think that fall can be so. You said this in the last in y'all's episode, how it can be. It's not, change isn't bad. It's just uncomfortable, and that there can be so many emotions during the change, but to just bring them to the Lord. And you talked about how we can tend to like suppress them, but to just be vulnerable with the Lord. And I know we talked about this a little bit when we talked about the winter season, but I just want to, I don't really have a question for it, but just giving your take on fall.
That's so beautiful. Fall is that season of where the leaves are changing and your life is just changing. I think about you two right now with engagement and you two having just this fall season of like everything changing, you know, where you're gonna live, who you're gonna live with, like just so many different things have changed. And I think back to just Chance and I's engagement and like kind of just like the overwhelming feelings of all these things, and exactly what you said and earlier is it's not bad to have change. It's not, it just is truthfully, if we're honest, super uncomfortable. And it can, I think if we don't know that we can bring it to God, we can kind of just like feel like just a jumbled up mess in our heads. And so I would say kind of the thing, as soon as you start talking about fall and change and all these different things, and even with Chance and I going through this change and everything, is just giving yourself grace, giving yourself, go ahead. Sorry, Strike's eating something that he shouldn't be eating, but I'm going to keep on going, Blakely to the rescue, but is just giving yourself grace, like giving yourself grace, Lord, of what you're going through. And God loves to give us grace. He is such a graceful God. And so I think just remembering that you don't have to have it all perfect or together, and that if you have some days that you are sad, like kind of thinking about the verse in Ecclesiastes where there's a season for everything. Like, if you have some times where you're sad, giving yourself grace to feel that sadness and not trying to suppress it is kind of what I'm trying to say. I think just even in the season that Chance and I have been in with so much change of being pregnant and now not pregnant, it's been so sweet because he's given us so much grace. And we with one another have given each other grace too, of like, it's okay to be sad today. Like, Chance hasn't been like, get up, we're going, like, let's go have fun. He's like, it's okay for you to be sad. Like, there's grace, and the Lord sees our emotions. So I would say that kind of in the fall changing season.
Going on. And I'll just finish that thought by saying what you said earlier that we had said on the podcast about change isn't necessarily bad. It's just, wait, what was the quote?
Uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Change, like, uncomfortability isn't a bad thing. It is just the byproduct of change. And I think oftentimes, and I saw this a lot with post-grad, people would think just because their circumstances were changing that life would get really bad. And I would always say, and I guess more so now I say back to that, is just because something's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's bad. Mm-hmm. You see that a lot with post-grad, and I really hate when people are like, put this horrible tone in people's minds about post-grad, because I think that just because something is uncomfortable, you can grow the most in those seasons, and there is so much good that can still come from those seasons. New places and new people and new opportunities and all of those things. It's just often up to us to change our perspective to see the good in the change. And I think even just with the season I'm in, and Taryn, same as you, it's like I'm moving the day after my wedding to somewhere that's the middle of nowhere, and I've fought a lot of those negative feelings.
Hey, don't talk about Oklahoma like that.
There is so much I love about Oklahoma, but the town I'm going to, there's a Sonic, and that's about it. And so I think that inevitably, just from me working at home and all of that, there's been a lot of just fear with that and negative feelings. And the last time I was there, I felt like God really just shifted my perspective, and also just a testament to, like, when we give things to him and give our honest feelings to him, so he can just change our perspective in a lot of ways. And I felt like that last time I was there, God just showed me the good that can come from this season if I approach it with the right mind frame. Yeah. When we approach something with the right mindset, it really can prepare our heart for the change that's coming and allow us to tackle that in the best way possible. And not that it's going to be perfect by any means, but just to better equip us going into that season. So I think if someone is likewise in a season of change, whether it's a move, a job shift, something with their family that's shifting, a relationship ending and a new one beginning, whatever it is, I think that each season, no matter how hard, change can bring a lot of good. And I think also just to mentally prepare yourself that it will be hard, but that's okay too.
Yeah. And like I kind of said earlier, it's just like I get the moving to middle of nowhere, because I live in the middle of nowhere right now, but there is literally like, there's more things, but there's less people, if that makes sense. Like here, there's less things, but there's all my people. When I move, after me and Trent get married, it's more things, but it's less people. Like it's literally just me and him down there. And so it's also a sense of middle of nowhere, even though there's more stores and things like that. We don't have any of our people there. And so it will be, I'm sure, a very like growing and important season for our marriage starting out, that it's just like it will just be us two to figure this out together until we get to move closer to family again. And so I get the all the emotions that come with that. I think the last thing that I just want to mention is, again, I was I was listening to a message the other day, and it was talking about, specifically it was on winter seasons, but she said something, and it said the thing about fruit is you can't grow fruit if you don't sow a seed. And a seed has to be sown in every season. And so just like Ecclesiastes 3:1 says that there's a season for everything, in every season there is a seed that you can sow. And seeds of time, like time with the Lord, seeds of the word, just literally writing his word on your heart and just taking it in and dwelling on it. Seeds of gratitude and praise in the times where it can be hard, or when you're so surrounded by goodness, but you might forget where all the goodness came from. And then tears are seeds too. And it says in Psalm 126, 5-6, those who sow in tears shall reap with shouts of joy. He who goes out weeping, bearing the seeds for sowing, shall come out with shouts of joy, bringing his sheaves with him. And I was pretty sure I knew what sheaves meant, but I looked it up, and sheaves are bundles of harvested grain, saying that you will come out with abundance and you will come out with a harvest. And your tears, Maya, are seeds too, and God has a harvest for you on the other side of them. And I had already wrote that down, but I felt like you might just need to hear that. So that's all I have. Do you guys have anything else to add?
Wow. Just thank you. I feel so honored to have gotten to come on here, and also just that you took the time to listen to our podcast, and that just God's timing and allowing us to re-talk about that. I didn't realize how much I needed this, and I'm just so grateful that God's timing is always best, and he always knows what we need. And I pray that this could bless the listeners half as much as it blessed all of us today for just getting to talk about these things.
For sure. Thank you so much. And I love what you said at the end about how in each season we sow a seed, because I haven't really thought about that before. And I'm looking back now and thinking about just different seasons and the different seeds, and just so thankful that God has done all that he has. And so I just love to get to hear, and having this conversation was so beautiful. And thank you so much for just all your wisdom too. You were talking about all the different things that you've read and listened to, and it's very evident that you are so wise yourself. So thank you so much for having us on today, Taryn.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for shuffling around and coordinating all the things to be able to make this happen. I was so excited, and I am so excited for everyone to hear. I love you both so much, and you both just radiate such the love and light of Jesus. And I wish that everybody had the privilege of knowing you guys, but I am so thankful that I do. And I know that you both have been such a light to me in my life. And so I just really appreciate you guys.
You as well, Taryn. We love you so much. We're so proud of you too.
Yeah, truly.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for choosing the garden to be a source for your... I'm glad I decided to do this towards the end, and this hasn't been what we've been dealing with the whole time.
That's so true. Thank you, Lord.
So with all that being said, thank you both for being here. Thank you all for tuning in, and I pray that you guys have a great rest of your day, a great rest of your week. I think this will be coming out on Thanksgiving Day. So happy Thanksgiving. And I love you all, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.